Alright, so we're going to pick up where we left off last week. So last week we got started drawing our ellipses in perspective. So again, our circles in perspective. I want to show you the progress that we made. So we turned that first ellipse that we drew into like a roll of tape. And so we're using construction lines, drawing an ellipse kind of like this, but where it's like a three-dimensional object. And we're going to use the ideas that we learned when we were talking about perspective as we're doing this. So this will be the first thing that we get started. And then I'm even going to show you guys how to draw like wheels on a car, things like that, that would be in two-point perspective. Can you guys think of anything, like any type of job that like these drawings look similar to? Any type of career where you'd be using like construction lines? Yeah. Architecture, absolutely. That's what comes to mind for me. You know, there are people that actually it's their job to design automobiles too. You know, I know a lot of this is done on the computer, but it used to be done by hand like this. And there were actually like drafting classes that you would take in college, learning about perspective and learning how to draw those things. I think it's helpful to understand it, you know, in a pencil and paper way. You know, then if you were to go on and make things on a computer, you'd have a much greater understanding of those things. And we are going to do a unit after our still life unit where you will have the option of drawing an animal or an automobile. And so a lot of people, you know, end up liking some of these concepts because that helps them draw things like wheels on a car. And so I'm going to flip my paper over. And so if you have this sheet of paper from last week, you can use that. If you need to start fresh or get a new piece of paper, there are some pieces of paper on the back table. Alright, so we've talked about drawing objects where they're kind of opaque, which means that you can't see through them. So that was kind of how I taught drawing one-point perspective objects. I want to quickly show you guys what it looks like when you draw an object translucently or transparently. So let's say that I started with a little rectangle over here. And you guys actually don't have to draw along with this. I just want to show you guys this. In a minute, I'll have you guys drawing along with me. So let's say I have my rectangle like that. And let's say that my vanishing point is up here. So what we were used to doing is we would just draw like this top portion here, like this, and then you'd see the top of that object. What we're doing when we're drawing transparently or translucently is we actually go from these inside corners here, and we also go to our vanishing point. So I'm going to draw these lighter, because these are not the lines that I would actually be seeing. This is as if I could kind of see through this shape, like if it was made of glass or something like that. Okay, but so we have those lines going back like that. And then let's say I decided that I wanted the top of my box to be, let's see, I'll put it right there, so I'll make it feel like it's kind of like a longer box, like that. So if it was transparent, what would happen, this might end up looking a little bit goofy because this meets up right at that line. But you'd have a line going down from here to this line, and from here to that line, and then you'd be able to see, again, it looks a little strange right now. I didn't plan it out this way, but so that the back of your box, the transparent part, is like kind of back there. So that's what our box would look like if it was transparent. And so when we're drawing complicated still life objects, it's helpful to think of them as transparent, as if you can see through those objects, and that helps to use construction lines to create those forms. But so I'm going to start by redrawing my ellipse into this shape, because I actually felt like the one that I had from the previous class could have been better. And so again, I'm going to start kind of lighter. And try to get a nice, accurate ellipse. Alright, so I'm going to call that good. I could probably go a little bit darker so that you can see it a little bit better. Are you guys able to see this okay on the projection? Okay, cool. Alright, so if we start with our ellipse like that, so that would kind of imply, you know, an ellipse sort of like that, where now what we need to do is we need to draw the front part of it and that bottom ellipse there. So right now we've just kind of drawn like the top ellipse for that object. But so the same way that I started by drawing the front of this guy here, I'm going to draw two vertical lines and kind of create this object so it looks like it's within a box. So I'm going to extend a line here. I'm going to try and keep my hypothetical lines lighter and my like actual edges of the object darker, because I think that that'll help. And go just a little bit bigger. And you guys will have to bear with me as we're getting this started. There ends up being a lot of overlaps, and so it is kind of tricky. So just kind of try to do your best with this. But so what I would do now is I would go from these inside corners, so here and here, over to my vanishing point. And I'm going to keep those pretty light just so that it doesn't get too confusing with the lines overlapping. And then what I would do is I would come up to like this top corner of my trapezoid, and I would bring a line straight down. Again, it's a little confusing because it is hitting right on this line, but so that would be kind of the back of my box if I was seeing it transparently. Alright, and so what I'm going to do now, I'm not crisscrossing the front of this box, so it's not this front part, but I'm crisscrossing the part that's like the bottom of the shape. So this shape right here, I'm doing a crisscross within that part to create the crosshairs like we did with our top ellipse, and this is going to be the one that's on the bottom. So because it's kind of hypothetical, I'm actually not seeing this part. Unless it was transparent, I'm keeping the lines lighter. Alright, and then I would crisscross this part too. And remember, this won't go all the way to the sides of this rectangle. It's going to go in that middle trapezoid, so it doesn't go over to here. It only comes as far as kind of that middle trapezoid that we're seeing. And then I would also give myself my vertical line, or the line that goes to the vanishing point. So like that. And once I start to darken and lighten some of my other lines, I think that this will make a little bit more sense. Alright, so the edges of my bottom ellipse are going to meet here, 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 and here. And so I can lightly start kind of going for that ellipse, and I'm going to go bolder as I start liking the shape of those lines. I'm actually going to lighten some of these side lines over here, because those are, again, kind of more of our construction lines. Those don't have as much to do with the object that I'm drawing. And then to complete this shape, I would just have vertical lines between my two ellipses, and so this ends up being the side of the roll of tape. And so I'm going to start going darker with my lines on my ellipse. And so because I'm not seeing this part back here, that's actually just part of my construction lines, and drawing it transparently, I would go darker with this curve here. And then I could start going darker with this top ellipse also. My lines could definitely be a little bit cleaner as I'm doing that, but that's okay. I'm just kind of trying to give you guys an idea of what this should look like. Alright, so that is the idea with our roll of tape. There would actually end up being, probably another ellipse within that center part in here. To kind of show like the hole in the roll of tape. But so that's what we're drawing. But so, in like a drawing where you were just starting it, sometimes people will just, and you don't have to draw with this part, you can just kind of watch, but they'll just draw that front part, kind of the half of the ellipse that we see, and I find that the mistake that people make if they only draw this curve is they have it being kind of too sharp over here, so it'll feel like too sharp of an edge here and here, or they might not draw that curve round enough. And so I find rather than just drawing that part that you see, drawing it as if that ellipse goes all the way around, it helps to get a better bottom part of that ellipse. And so that's a technique where, so like let's say I was just free drawing a cylinder like this, I would have my top ellipse like this, but then the mistake that I oftentimes see students make is they just kind of try and draw this part here, and maybe it's like a little bit of a curve, but it feels like it gets too flat at like the edge here and at the edge here. And so drawing that going all the way around really helps to get that object to make sense. So I'm going to pause my recording and come around and take a look at where people are at and see if this. All right, nice job, you guys. So now we're going to start drawing a vertical. Sorry, I need everybody's attention. Now we're going to start drawing a vertical ellipse or elliptical thing. And so everybody, you can turn over your piece of paper. And if you need a new piece of paper, there's some on that round table. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by giving myself a horizon line. I'm going to put it a little bit higher on the page, so about right here. And again, with these initial lines, I'm going to draw them kind of just dark enough so that I think you guys can see them, but I'm going to try not to go too dark. So, you know what? Actually, I want to pull something up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a vertical line. So remember back to our 2-point perspective drawings. So I've got a vertical line like that. And then, forgot to give myself vanishing points, but I'll give myself a vanishing point here and here. And then I'm going to go back to my vanishing points from the top and the bottom of this line. Alright, and so I'm thinking about a wheel as if it's kind of heading like this way. And so the edge of that wheel would be like that, but it would be smaller. And there would actually be another one back here, but it would also be smaller. But so that's kind of the angle where it's coming towards us, where we're seeing kind of an angle like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this side not quite as long. So I'm going to give myself a vertical line over on this side because the wheel's not going to be quite as wide as it is tall. And then I'm going to give myself a vertical line over here, but it shouldn't be quite as wide as it is tall because I'm seeing it a little bit at an angle. So I'm going to get kind of a shape about like that. Alright, then I'm going to give myself the top of this rectangle. Like so. And then this is a little tricky, so I'm going to keep these lines pretty light. But so if I'm drawing this transparently, I'm actually going to go from this inside part here and this inside part to my vanishing points. And so that will make it look transparent or translucent. So I'm going to keep these lines really light just so that they don't confuse you too much. Can you see that even though it's pretty light? Cool. And then the last thing, if I drew this correctly, I should be able to drop a vertical line down from this corner here down to here. And so that would be like the inside of my box. Alright, this part I'm going to draw a little bit darker, just because it'll help us to see the process. But so I'm going to divide this side in half horizontally, like so. And then I'm going to go through this center crisscross here over to my right vanishing point. Like so. And then I'm going to also give myself a vertical line, like so. Now the same thing happens with my ellipse, so it's going to meet the edges of this shape here, 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 and here. And so I can start lightly kind of trying to find my elliptical shape. And the more accurate that I go with my searching lines, the darker I can start to go with it. And there is a little bit of distortion when you draw this way, and it probably has to do with the vanishing points being just not quite right in the perfect spot, or my square being just a little bit too wide or too tall. And so if it doesn't look perfect, don't worry about it too much. We're just kind of learning how this works. So there, I have my ellipse. So now I can start going a little bit darker with it. Alright, so this is the side of the wheel that is facing us. Alright, so I understand it's a little bit tough to see, but now this back part of this box here, I would draw a crisscross within that shape too and repeat the process. So this is where, we start getting overlapping lines and it becomes a little tough to see. I think you guys are doing a really good job kind of problem solving and figuring this out. And then I would do the same thing where I would look at where the center of that shape is, and I would go back to my vanishing point. So I'm going over to my right vanishing point. And then I'm also giving myself a vertical line. And so at that point, you should be able to see where your second ellipse is going to hit the edges of this shape over here. And so again, I'm going to stay pretty light to start with. And then one thing that I can do is I can kind of start lightening some of the lines that I feel like are distracting me, where they're kind of construction lines. So I can lighten some of those a little bit. And then you would go from your vanishing point right like this, and you would go to kind of the furthest parts of the curve that you can see. And this part I will draw darker. And then I can go over my ellipse over here and go a bit darker with that too, to imply the parts that I should actually be seeing. And so that would be my car wheel drawn in 2-point perspective. Now I'm going to come around and kind of take a look again and see how people are doing. If you are still working on this, trying to figure it out, that's fine. If you feel like it's heading in a good direction and you're good, you could go, okay, you know what? I'm going to draw that back tire. Like so. And so that's all I'll give you guys, but see if you could figure that out. Maybe I'll give you guys just a tiny bit more. So something about like that shape for my back tire.